Chair Patrick Kelly with Palmetto State Teachers Association. Today marks the fourth consecutive session I've testified regarding an ESA bill. When I testified before you last year, I said it felt like the movie Groundhog Day. So I guess that makes today the sequel that was never released, the one where Bill Murray spends 12 months thinking he's out of Groundhog Day, only to wake up one morning to I Got You Babe blaring on the radio and figuring out he's back in the same loop. Of course, the reason I thought we'd move beyond the education policy version of Groundhog Day is because the ESA bill the governor signed last year was promoted as a 3-year pilot program to measure demand for and effectiveness of ESA programs in South Carolina. While PSTA had and still has concerns with the substance of that policy, we appreciated a pilot approach to allow the state to gather and evaluate data on the program and make appropriate adjustments. However, H 5164 can't be viewed as an appropriate adjustment for one simple reason. We don't have any data yet. For that reason, I'm left with this question: what's the rush? To be clear, some of the proposals in this bill are good and timely, and I've pointed those out in the written feedback I submitted to you. However, on the big ticket items in this bill, there are 4 quick reasons to not rush this bill. First, there's no evidence of sufficient demand to justify eliminating the annual cap on funded ESAs. As of last week, 28 families had requested 4,200 ESAs, less than the 5,000 available this year and far less than the 15,000 that would be available in 2026. Second, there's not currently sufficient infrastructure in South Carolina to support an expansion of ESAs. In the past, supporters of ESAs have said that the lack of non-public options in rural areas, their response sounded kind of like a line from Field of Dreams. If you build the ESA program, they will come. Well, I'm telling you, the program is built and they haven't come yet. As of last week, the department had approved 181 education service providers, and as you can see on this map, they're all clustered in suburban and urban areas of the state. There are 8 counties that do not have an approved provider on the ESA program and 12 counties with only 1. Now, it's possible that this map will light up with more providers by the time 2026 rolls around, but that's no reason to expand the program today. Third, ESAs in South Carolina have no data to show they're effective in helping students reach their academic potential. The reason's simple: we haven't handed out an ESA yet. Now, I know proponents of the expansion will say, aha, but there is evidence in other states that ESAs lead to improved academic outcomes. I'll concede that, as long as they'll concede that there are studies that show exactly the opposite. And it's important to note the only truly national measure of academic progress, NAEP, has limited ability to support these claims. Finally, this expansion would have a profound impact on the state budget. If the funding methodology in this bill were in place this year, it would blow a hole millions of dollars deep in the delicate work conducted by the Ways and Means Committee to produce a balanced budget. For these reasons, I ask you to adjourn debate on this bill. Let the existing program roll out. Evaluate the data as the law currently requires. In the meantime, convene stakeholders to collaborate on improvements, something this subcommittee has done brilliantly on bills ranging from seizure action plans to recess time. And while that collaboration plays out, focus your most valuable and limited resource, your time, on other issues. I'll close by saying I've heard Superintendent Weaver say we can, quote, chew gum and walk at the same time in response to those that argue we can't afford to fund both ESAs and improve public schools. You know what? I agree with her. In fact, I'll go further and say we must do 2 things or more at once. The needs are that great and our children deserve nothing less. However, we need to make sure it's actually gum that we're putting in our mouths. And until this pilot ESA program is evaluated, I don't see how we can be sure of that. So I've submitted amendments for your consideration as well. I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any about those or about anything that I've said, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Patrick, for being here. In reviewing your letter, I noted that you mentioned that H 5164, from your perspective, would diminish, not improve, the quality of school choice in South Carolina. Can you just kind of expound a little bit upon that? That's a strong statement.
Sure.
Why do you believe that?
I firmly believe that in order for school choice to work, it must meet 3 criteria. It must be affordable, it must be accessible, and it must be accountable. This bill diminishes each of those 3 criteria in substantial ways. On affordability, the continued failure of the state to cap the tuition for a child with an ESA attending a private school will make affordability an issue if we go universal. The example of Arizona, that has recently gone universal, research has found that tuition, not in all private schools, but in a substantial number of private schools, increased to such a rate that it outpaced the universal ESA. this bill needs to cap tuition for the ESA student if we're going to make it an affordable option. On accessibility, this bill doesn't do anything. Currently, under state law, charter schools cannot deny admission to a child on the basis of disability, creed, gender, or need for special education services. But a non-public provider can deny an ESA child admission for that reason. That is not choice for that family, that is choice for that school. And the accountability elements of this bill are the most concerning. The academics continue to concern me because the linking studies that are conducted for these national norm reference tests are can be run by the same company that's selling the test. That doesn't pass the smell test. But the fiscal accountability measures, this bill strips out the audit requirement. I don't understand in a state where we have $1.8 billion sitting around why we wouldn't want an audit of something. And it strips out the requirement for the non-public school education service provider to fully report test scores to parents. In a General Assembly focused on transparency for parents, why would we not want every single data point reported to parents? So for those reasons, I think it diminishes affordability, accessibility, and accountability. And for those reasons, I think it diminishes choice.
Well, I think a point that you just raised from the accountability piece, the audit piece, I think we all should be, especially with some of the things that we've been seeing happening in state government, should be wanting more transparency instead of less. So that's certainly concerning for me. I also agree, from a standpoint of we just passed a similar bill. This is more expansive, and we don't even have data. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but this is before the courts now, correct?
It'll be before the Supreme Court tomorrow. Yes, sir.
And so, quite honestly, the constitutionality of it,
Yes,
from
sir.
my understanding. So, just from my perspective, I'm not sure why we're not waiting on that decision before we try to further expand it. That's all for now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Alexander.
Thank you very much. It may not necessarily be a question for you, but for this committee and for the staff. What is the status of our existing bill relative to this that we passed last year? Do we have no data? Not necessarily. Maybe the staff could answer that.
I can answer some of that.
Okay, thank you.
As of this morning, we had 5,015 applications that have been received for the program. And as of Thursday, 2/29, 246 service providers have been approved.
So right now we don't have no one receiving anything yet
Yeah, it's coming. Yes.
for the next year. Okay.
It's for the fall of 24.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Mr.